everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be doing the annual Games I Finished in a Year, where I get to talk about all the games that I played through on my own time for funsies, since I'm not going to be talking about all the games I've reviewed, because I've done whole videos on those if you want to know what I think about them. But this gives me an opportunity to talk about games that I normally don't talk about for reviews and such. Well, I say that now, but there is one game on this list that I actually did review years ago, but I'll talk about it when I get there. So that being said, let's begin the list. Now, the first game that I beat in 2025 was in February, and that happens to be Super Robot Taisen OG Saga Endless Frontier. Yeah, what a mouthful. So this is a DS game that was developed by Monolith. And of course, I'm talking about the Monolith that made all the Xeno games and such, not the other one. So this is a very over-the-top turn-based RPG, where the battle system is very similar to Project Cross Zone, but obviously this came first. Now, I've said it in the past that Project Cross Zone is one of those games that I really want to love it, but unfortunately I kinda don't. But here's the weird thing, is that I actually feel like that this battle system with the whole juggling enemies and pressing a button that just keep on continuing a combo, I feel like it works better in this game than it did in Project Cross Zone. And that's mainly because you're not dealing with so many units, where in this game you have 3 people in your main party, where in Project Cross Zone you have to control like a shit ton of units and you're just like going through battles that just take forever to get through. So because of that, I feel like this game was a lot more enjoyable to play through. Although it still does get a little bit repetitive after a while, since all you're doing is just pressing the right button and making sure you press it at the right time because you don't want the enemies to touch the ground or else they can do like a counterattack on you. But I still thought it was like a pretty decent time to play through it, and it also helps too that the characters and the whole story is just so over the top and stupid, and I absolutely loved it. Like, the game was just really freaking hilarious. Like, all the main characters would just constantly bicker and make fun of each other in the most cheesiest, dumbest ways ever. And one thing that actually surprised me about this game that I didn't know until I played it was that Cosmos is a playable character, and she's actually a part of the story too, which is fucking craziness. Because if I knew that Cosmos was in this game back in the day when this game came out, I totally would have bought a Nintendo DS just for this game, because that was around the time when I was first really getting into the Xenosaga games. And reasons like this is a big reason why I really love the fact that I just don't look up a shit ton of things about a video game that sounds interesting to me. I just go into it with knowing very little things about it, and then I get surprised by stuff like that. So overall, I actually did like Endless Frontier. Yeah, I'm just gonna call it that, it's just easier to say. I wouldn't say it's like an amazing RPG, but I do think it does have enough like funny, amusing things going on to it that actually did make it pretty enjoyable. But because the game does get a little bit repetitive, I do think this is a game that you might want to take a little bit of breaks between certain dungeons. Now the next game, so this is the weird one that I was kind of referencing earlier, is that this is a game I actually did review ages ago, so long ago that it was actually the very first game I reviewed, and that happens to be Knuckles Chaotix. Yes, I finally beat this game. I know some of you are thinking, wait, you reviewed a game that you didn't finish? Yeah, well, you gotta remember, this is like the really early stuff. Like, I was still in high school when I made that video. Plus, another thing, to be fair, is that, you know, it's a freaking Sonic game. As long as you put a decent amount of time into the game and understand how the mechanics work, I think you can at least determine if you like it or not. You know, it's just like with reviewing Pit Fighter. That's a game that I'm sure most people that have played it probably never finished it because of how much the game sucked. Because it really doesn't take much time to figure out how shitty the game is. But anyways, without all the high school BioPhoenix days, finally beating this game after all this time actually felt pretty good. In my opinion of the game, hasn't changed too much from what I remember, was that it is a game that I kinda liked, I just wasn't really good at it. Also, I wouldn't put it on the same level as the other classic era of Sonic games, but I still kinda like it for what it is though. Like, the whole rubber band mechanic does take some time to get used to, but I actually did like a lot of the levels in here. The only levels I really didn't like was the Amazing Arena, which is totally not amazing at all. And I remember there was an Act 3 that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I just don't remember which one it was, but there was a certain Act 3 that I didn't like. But other than that, I actually really liked all the other levels enough. And the whole random chance of like which level you're gonna do was actually kind of interesting and does make every playthrough a little bit different, which I do kinda like that. The only downside to it is that there's always a chance that you have to play the amazing arena 3 times in a row. And of course, my favorite thing about the game that isn't the music is the fact that you get to play as Espio and Vector, who are like 2 of my favorite Sonic characters. So that pretty much sums up everything I have to say about it. It's a game that I'm glad to have finished, as it's a game that has a lot of history on this channel, and I'm glad to have finally done it. And the next game on here is a game that I actually streamed the whole thing on this channel, and it's a PS2 game that I was really looking forward to playing, and that happens to be Onimusha Dawn of Dreams. Now, I think it was 2024 was when I finished Onimusha 3, and I really loved it a lot. So I was really excited to go try out this one, as it was the one that I really didn't know a whole lot about it. But now looking back on it though, I have to say, I do like this game, but I wouldn't say I loved it, and yeah, for that reason, I was a little bit disappointed. But that's not to say that I think it's a bad game. Because, you know, just because I say something is disappointing does not necessarily mean it's bad. Yeah, some games can be a disappointment and are shit, but there are some games that are still good, but, you know, maybe not be as good as you wanted them to be. So I'm going to talk about all the good things first. So, I really like the cast of characters in this game, especially the main character, Soki. I think he is just a really fun, great main character. He definitely reminds me of Yuri from Shadow Hearts in a lot of ways, which is always an awesome thing. But all the other characters that join him are also very cool and fun as well. And the game's combat is still very good and fun, just like with the third game, so you know, that's all well and good, I love all that. But the one thing about this game that does set itself apart from all the other ones is that this game does have more of an RPG feeling to it as you do level up your characters and such. And I actually do like that change as well, even though it did make certain parts feel a little bit more of a grind, but otherwise, like, it was still pretty cool just to have that feature in this type of game. Also, there are some pretty cool set pieces in this game too that I also really liked as well. Although unfortunately, it doesn't have the same amount of variety that the third game have, but it's understandable given that the third game had a very cool idea with the story about the past and the future and such, so you know, that's perfectly fine. Now, as for the things that I didn't love about this game, is that as much as I like the cast of characters in this game, there is one character that I just really hated to use, and that was Roberto. And it really makes me sad because he has a really cool character design, also his whole story arc I thought was pretty interesting, and also on top of that too, I mean, you know, he goes around punching people. I mean, come on, like, how do you fuck that up? Well, I'll tell you how they fucked that up, was that they had to give him the worst moveset ever. So not only does his basic punching move, like, just not feel good, like, every time you punch an enemy, they, like, barely react to it, but on top of that, his whole moveset just doesn't feel responsive like all the other characters. It almost seems like that the developers just gave up working on his character and just released the game like that. And what's worse about it is that there is a boss fight in this game where you have to use him, and it's a giant fly that flies around and you can only hit him when he's on the ground, and of course he only stays on the ground for like not even 5 seconds, so yeah, that fight was not fun at all. In fact, speaking of which, that kind of goes into another thing that I find to be disappointing about this game, is that Onimusha 3 bosses were really damn fun and really awesome, where in this game, there are some bosses that are really fun and good, and then there are some that are really frustrating, but are actually still kind of very satisfying to take down once you memorize their patterns. But then there are some that are just really fucking awful. Obviously, the one with Roberto is easily the worst, but there are other ones that are honestly not much better. Like, for an example, there was one boss that you had to fight twice, where it was just this giant swinging ball going down a tight corridor, and as again, it's another one of those bosses where the opportunities to hit him are very, very small, and it takes forever, and the fact that you have to fight him twice is just ridiculous. And the last thing that I will mention, because I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm like really complaining a lot, but there really is a lot of noticeable things when you play 3 and then move on to this one, is that I did find that this game actually started to drag on towards the end, because it seemed like you fight a tough boss, you beat him, and then it's like, oh, is the game done? It's like, oh no, there's another boss, and then you beat that guy, and then it's like, okay, can we finally end this shit now? And then no, there's like another boss too that also takes like forever, and then it's just like, like I just want this game to be fucking done with. So yeah, that's another thing that kind of sucks, is the fact that I feel like the game kind of overstayed its welcome. But, you know, despite all of these complaints that I really ranted on, is that, like I said, I don't hate this game, I do like it, I just wouldn't put it on the same level as 3, and even though I never really got far into 2, for what I have played of it, I'm pretty sure I would like 2 more than this game. But I'm just assuming so, you never know, maybe 2 has some, like, fucking annoying ass shit too that I don't know about. But anyways, I just want to say that Dawn of Dreams I don't think is a bad game, it just happens to have some frustrating aspects to it that I think could have been done a little bit better. And I can still appreciate many things about this game, and plus, you know, despite the frustrating aspects, I still thought it was just very fun to stream through this whole game. And the next one I finished here happens to be a newer game, and that is Unicorn Overlord. Now this is a game that I actually liked a lot more than I thought I was going to. Because from what I remember seeing of the game before it came out, I was like, oh, Vanillaware, and they're making a strategy RPG, oh, this looks really cool. But I was kind of expecting it to being the, you know, the typical ones like Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, which, you know, I'd be perfectly down for, but it ended up being a lot more than that. And that being a mixture of Ogre Battle and Growlancer, so hot damn, I am all loving that. So yeah, it is a strategy RPG that happens to have like an open world where you can just run around on a map, very similar to the Growlancer games. And as for Ogre Battle, it has the same way of how you do units and characters, where all the characters, you can assign them to different units, and and they all like kind of like work together and such. It's really cool, and it has a lot of customization that you can do with your units, which is just great. And I found that running around the map, getting into fights with random people, was always very addicting, and this is one of those games that's really good for playing an RPG when you don't have a lot of time, because even if you play for less than an hour, you can still feel like you're like always like doing something and getting something accomplished. Because there is a lot of battles and missions in this game that are very short, but actually are very rewarding. Of course there are some battles that are a little bit longer, but there is so much like other like side stuff you can do that really don't take much time at all, and like I said, you can get a lot accomplished with such little time. And as always, when it comes to Vanillaware games, the art direction and all the character designs and all that, really fucking awesome, love it a whole lot. That is something that they never miss the mark on. Now as for the story stuff, I will say, the main plot itself is pretty typical fantasy stuff. You know, an evil warlord ends up taking over a kingdom, and then your main guy's like the chosen one, yada yada yada, yeah, who the fuck cares. But the thing that does make the story really good is the character interactions. Like, all the different characters that you end up helping out along the way and telling them to join your cause are all very, very good. Like, I actually liked pretty much almost every character. The only 2 characters that I, didn't love, and that's mainly because I thought they were just kind of generic, and that being the main character, Elaine. Yeah, he was pretty typical, good guy, whatever. And then also his, I think it was his childhood friend, Scarlet, the healer chick. Yeah, she was kind of whatever, too. But everyone else was so good that it, more than made up for that. But as for some of my favorite characters, well, if I had to name a few, they would be like Hodrick. I thought he was a really good introductory character. And then there's that one badass warrior chick who starts with the letter B. Unfortunately, I don't remember her name or how to say it, but I'm pretty sure you know what character I'm talking about if you played this game. But yeah, B for badass. I also really like Travis, he was the thief guy at the beginning. Also, some of the elf characters were really cool as well, but yeah, I'd be here forever if I had to list off every single character that I liked, because like I said, I liked pretty much everyone except for the 2 that I said that were a little bit meh. But if this game does have one flaw about it, well, the flaw in it doesn't have to do with something in the game itself, it has to do with the company Vanillaware, and that is the fact that they never released this game on PC. What the fuck, guys? Like, what are you thinking? You're losing out on free money. So yeah, kind of funny that the biggest complaint I have of a game is the fact that it wasn't released on PC. And for those that are wondering, yeah, I played this on the Switch, and the game actually does run very good on there. It's just, I would have preferred buying the game on PC if I could, but given that I do have a Switch that I haven't used in a little while, well, I figured I might as well try it, and well, it ended up being one of my favorite games I played this year, so I'm glad that I actually didn't miss out on it. So I can definitely say for sure that if you do like strategy RPGs, I do think that Unicorn Overlord is worth looking into if you haven't played it yet. Alright, and the next one we got here is one that I'm not going to spend too much time on, and that happens to be Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards on the Game Boy Advance. Now, here's the thing, the version I played of this was actually a part of that anniversary collection that Konami put out. And yeah, I could easily emulate those games for free, but the reason why I bought that collection was because playing games like this on the go, I just think just feels a lot better. So I just felt like it just kind of made sense just to play it on the Switch. And yeah, I actually really like this one, as I never played it back in the day, but even playing it today, yeah, I actually still really liked it. But then again, you guys all know I just never get tired of old school Yu-Gi-Oh games. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole, like, shenanigans of how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And shit, but I will just say that the thing that I liked about this one was the fact that you just get to run around to the different cities and parts of the map and dueling random people, and thankfully the game's RNG is not stupidly crazy like Forbidden Memories on PS1, so yeah, that's all I'm going to say about this one. I just thought it was just a really good, fun Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. Now the next one we got here is yet another Game Boy Advance game, but no, it's not a Yu-Gi-Oh game, but it is a part of a very well-known series, and that happens to be Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. So this is a game I actually did play a little bit of back in the day. A friend of mine let me borrow it for a little bit, so obviously I never finished it. And it only took until 2025 to actually like properly play through it, and I had a really good ass time with it. So this was the other Mario RPG series that, you know, has the whole like interactive battle systems, which I always really love. And in this game, yeah, it's fun as hell, very addicting. And the game's story was pretty fun and very silly at times, but I mean that in like the best kind of way. Plus the main antagonist not being Bowser was actually kind of refreshing too, even though you do fight him near the end of the game, but you know, he's not like the main bad guy there. And there is some pretty cool levels you get to go through, there is some pretty fun bosses you get to fight that are also very unique and do have some little gimmicks that were fun to overcome. And the game's soundtrack is, like, really damn good. Like, even for, like, GBA sound bit, like, it actually sounds really great. So yeah, this was a game that felt really nice to play, as, you know, it was a game that I played a little bit of back in the day, so I did have some little bit of nostalgia, like, seeing, like, the beginning part again, and then, you know, seeing all the other stuff that I didn't see before. Yeah, it was very fun and exciting, and I'm definitely, looking forward to playing the sequel there, Partners in Time, because that was another one I did play a little bit of back then, but I never finished it either. And this is not the last time we're going to be talking about an RPG with an interactive battle system, and I'm sure you can probably take a guess what it is, but stay tuned and we'll talk about it soon. So the next one on here is a PS2 game, and that happens to be Nightshade, part of the Shinobi series. So this is a beat-em-up hack-and-slash game that has a very interesting gimmick to it, but it is one of those gimmicks that is a lot easier to just know what's going on just by seeing it rather than me having to poorly explain it. But basically, most enemies in this game die very quickly, and the whole point is that you kill an enemy, he's frozen, and then you have to quickly dash to another one, kill him quickly, and then it kind of creates like a whole chain row. So basically the whole game is all about trying to make like the biggest chain of killing enemies in a quick time session. So despite it looking very similar to a Ninja Gaiden-like game, yeah, it doesn't feel like a Ninja Gaiden game. So it does have its own thing going for it, and I have heard that the Shinobi reboot on PS2 was kind of similar too, but I haven't played that one yet. Maybe I'll get to that one in 2026, but I actually have to say I did kind of like it here though. I actually thought it was like kind of fun and addicting. And a lot of the levels never overstayed their welcome either, which was also kind of nice. And I also do like a lot of the settings in the game too. There is some pretty cool set pieces you get to go through. And after you beat the game, you can also unlock some special costumes and other characters, and one of them is Joe from the Shinobi game, so that's actually pretty cool. And if I remember right, if you want to unlock him, you have to collect all the different hidden coins throughout all the levels. But as much as I do like this game, I did find there was a couple annoying bosses in this game, mostly being the final boss, where it's really annoying just to even hit him. But other than that, I did find it to be pretty enjoyable. It just may feel like a bit weird because, like I said, it is a very different type of hack and slash game. It's definitely not a Devil May Cry game. But one last thing I will end off with this one is that the ending theme of this game is just really damn good. It almost kind of reminds you of a song from the game Outrun 2, which I guess makes sense because, you know, they're both Sega, but still, it kind of gives me that feeling of it, and I really love that shit. Now as for the next one, we're actually going to be going through these next three pretty quickly, as I did talk about them in a video not that long ago, and that was the top 30 Game Boy and Game Boy Color. So obviously, because these games were in that video, yeah, I love all of these games. So the three that I'm going to be mentioning here are Wario Land 2, Fortified Zone 2, that was the Japan only one, and then it's Avenging Spirit. So real quick, I'll just repeat and say that Wario Land 2 was really fun because it was just a really funny game that was also pretty chill to play through, not too hard at all. I mean, you can't even die in the game, which is kind of funny. And Fortified Zone 2 was really impressive, and I really loved it because it kind of reminded me of like a new Guardian Legend, but if it had the Contra aesthetic. It was really cool. And Avenging Spirit was that really cool platformer where you get to play as a ghost possessing people, kind of like the game Geist on the GameCube as a platformer, and I've always really loved the concept of that, and it felt pretty damn good to finally beat this game, as it's a game I've played many times, but I was just never really good at it, and I still find it to be very impressive that it's an arcade game that got ported to the Game Boy, and it handles pretty damn well considering, you know, the limitations and such. And next one we have is a PS2 game in an iconic platforming series, and that happens to be Crash Twinsanity. Now, when it comes to the Crash games, I really love the original trilogy on PS1. Well, I guess that's not really a surprise, since that's what most people tend to say, but I have tried one game that came out after that one, which was Wrath of Cortex, and unfortunately, I didn't really care for it much, and then after that, I just kinda fell out of the series, and it wasn't until more recent years that I kinda got curious about checking out some of the other ones, and this was one of them, Twinsanity. And I have to say, I actually thought it was a pretty decent entry in the series. Obviously, I don't put it on the same level as 1, 2, and 3, but I do think it does have its good stuff going for it. So I guess you could say it's kind of similar to what I said about Onimusha Dawn of Dreams, where I do like the game, but it does have some flaws and annoying aspects about it. So the first thing I do have to say is that this game has a very interesting development history. I'm obviously not going to go into everything about it today, but I will say that if you're interested about learning about the creation of this game, it is very, very fascinating. So yeah, the whole concept of this game is all about Crash having to team up with Cortex, and if there is one thing that this game does consistently well at, it's the comedy, cause man, this game was funny as hell. Also, the whole a cappella soundtrack I thought was very amusing and fun, and really fit the game's tone. And as for the levels, it's kind of a mixed bag, where you got some levels that are really good and quite strong, and then you got other levels that are unfortunately a little on the crappy and annoying side. But I would say there was more good than bad. And believe it or not, the final platforming section was actually my favorite part of the whole game. Like, it was challenging, but it wasn't, like, stupidly hard. It was actually just really, really fun. I don't know how to explain it. I just had just a blast playing through it. And then a good example of a level that sucked happened to be the underground lab where you gotta escort Cortex when he's going through the whole contraption thing. Yeah, that one is, like, really slow and tedious. But one boss battle that I really liked in this game was the one with Dingle Dial. I actually thought that was a really fun one. So yeah, I personally do kind of like this one. Like I said, not like top tier amazing, but also by no means bad at all. In fact, I would even say that it is a really good improvement compared to Wrath of Cortex. But as for the one that came out after this one, well, I don't know, but I'm willing to give it a fair shot. Alright, now as for this next one, this is one that I'm sure a lot of people are very curious to know what I'm going to say about this game, as it's a game that not only came out this year, I bought it, and I actually finished it. Yeah, like, this is the only 2025 released game I actually completed this year. And I kind of hinted at it earlier when talking about Mario and Luigi, so yeah, that should be obvious at this point. But yes, it's Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And one funny and ironic thing I have to mention was that, according to the list of games that I completed on PC, this was the 33rd one. Yeah, I swear I didn't plan that. Like, when I beat this game and then added it to the list and count the number up by 1, I was like, oh shit, it's the 33rd game, how ironic. So before the game came out, I looked at the name, had no idea what it was, and was like, okay, this must be a new IP. Well, this shit better not be some, like, rip-off Naughty Dog game, or some rip-off, like, Bethesda wannabe open world game, because if it is, then I have no interest in this shit. And as you all know, this game is definitely not that at all. So as I was watching it, I saw the trippy visuals, and I thought they were really cool looking, and then I saw the combat system, and I was just like, holy shit. This is basically a mixture of Shadow Hearts and Sugunai Atonement on PS2, like, what the fuck? Because I've said this many times on my channel that if I can't get a new Shadow Hearts game, the most that I do want is just another turn-based combat system that happens to be very interactive and fun, you know, like I was talking about with Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, but also has some dark themes that are very mature, and yeah, this is probably the closest I'll ever get to a new Shadow Hearts game, or really a new Sugunai, because I do feel like this game does have more Sugunai elements than Shadow Hearts, but still, it's like a combination between the two. So after seeing all that, I was actually very curious about checking out this game, and then when this game finally came out, oh my god, dude, like, this game just fucking blew up out of nowhere, because I was not expecting this game to be as big as it was, because, you know, I was like, god damn, like, where were all these people when Shadow Hearts and Sugunai came out? Like, where were they? So anyways, with all that, like, speculative shit out of the way, what did I think? Well, I can definitely say for sure that I actually really enjoyed this game, and like I said about Unicorn Overlord, it probably is one of my favorite games that I played in 2025. So yeah, I'm not going to go into the whole battle system stuff since I already talked about how it's very similar to Sugunai and Shadow Hearts, and yeah, I absolutely loved it here. The developers even said that Shadow Hearts was their main inspiration for this game, and well, it definitely shows, and it also makes me respect them for knowing the good shit. But as for the story and characters, yeah, I actually thought it was really enjoyable too. The world was just really cool and psychedelic looking, which, you know, I tend to love psychedelic shit, so that's perfect for me. And all the characters, I just really liked them a lot. I thought they all had some really good shit going on for them, really good dialogue, and there's also a lot of, like, unexpected comedy bits too that I really liked. Like, one example that I will say, and don't worry, it's early on in the game, so it's not a spoiler. So at the beginning of the game, the main character, Gustav, he goes through a lot of shit at the beginning, and he gets, like, really mad at one point, and he's just like, you know what, just fuck the mission! And after saying that, Lune is just like, really, Gustav? Fuck the mission? Like, what are you, an angsty teenager again? She said something along the lines of that, and just the way how she said it was just so damn funny to me. And there's a lot of other really good ones too later, so yeah, I'm not gonna give away too much about that, but there is a lot of good stuff here that may catch you off guard. And as for the game's soundtrack, well, hot damn, this game's soundtrack is just amazing for that. Not only does it have, like, a crazy variety of stuff, like, I'm talking about, it has, like, the crazy orchestrated stuff, it has music that kind of sounds like the game Nier's soundtrack, which is amazing. It also has some hard rock and metal, it also has some techno and trance, it even has some jazz, and there's even, like, a song in here that almost sounds like a Dream Theater song, and it even has one that almost sounds like a Dynasty Warrior theme. It's fucking nutty. And the game also has a lot of customization that you can do with the characters, with all the different weapons and the skills and such. In fact, the whole skill system of this game does remind me a little bit of Growlancer 5. Obviously, it's not exactly like it, but it does have some elements of it that does remind me of it a little bit, and I really like it. Now, before we get moving on, and me saying that I really like this game, do I really think it's exactly what other people are saying, that it's the greatest game ever made? Personally, I think it's a little too soon for me to say something like that. Like, yes, I did really enjoy my time with this game a lot, but would I really say it's the greatest game that I ever played in my whole life? I don't know about that yet. Like with the game that I keep comparing this game to, with Shadow Hearts, that is a game that I do consider to be one of my all-time favorite RPGs, and I've beaten it 3 times since I first played it back in 2015, and every time I played it, I loved it just as much. Like, the game never wore off. Where to me, that game really stood the test of time, where am I gonna feel the same way about Expedition 33 on a second playthrough? Who knows, only time will tell. But I can say for sure that there's really not that much flaws I have with this game. Like, I only have one, and it's like very minor. And it's basically that sometimes when you get into a battle with an enemy and then you respawn back onto the map, sometimes like your characters won't face in the same direction that you were when you got into the battle, so sometimes you'll be walking forward and you realize like, shit, I'm going backwards. Like I said, very minor, and honestly it's almost nitpicky at that point, so if that's really the worst thing I can say about your game, I think you're doing a pretty damn good job. And yeah, I know, some people are gonna call me a normie for liking this game, but honestly, who the fuck cares? I just want a game that's fun. I don't give a shit if the game is like, you know, sweeping the awards and getting all this praise or whatever. Like, honestly, I don't give a flying fuck about the Game Awards. Like, dude, like, even if the Game Awards happen to nominate a Deception game at one of them, I still wouldn't give a shit. Alright, yeah, I think that's an appropriate ending with talk about Clear Obscure about not giving a fuck about the Game Awards. So anyways, now let's get moving on to a game that is much smaller than that, and that happens to be Gestalt, Steam and Cinder, and every time I read the name of this game, I keep thinking it says Steam and Cider, but, you know, Steam and Cinder makes sense, but Steam and Cider also does sound kinda cool too. So this is a 2D Metroidvania game, you know, the type of genre of games that I really like, but I'm really bad at them. And before I bought this game, I really loved the way how this game looks. Like, not only does it have a really awesome pixel art style, but also the main character is like some redhead badass chick with a Vampire Hunter D looking hat. Like, how could you go wrong with that? So I was very intrigued, but before I bought it though, I did want to see what some of the reviews were of this game, and funny enough, one of the top reviews that I remember at the time was someone was complaining about this game, and his two biggest complaints were too easy and the map wasn't big enough, and I was just like, welp, that's perfect for me. So I bought the game right after that, and I played it, and I managed to finish it, and it was really fun. Now, he wasn't wrong that yes, the game is not that hard. I wouldn't say it was stupidly easy, since I did die a couple times, but the game was fairly chill for the most part, but it is also a very forgiving game too. And yeah, the game's map was not huge and confusing, but that's what I liked about it though. But there was some really cool set pieces in this game that I really liked. I also liked using the different abilities in the game, and yeah, because the game was not super huge and confusing, exploration was still pretty fun, I found. So if you're also like me, who is not great at these games, I do think this is a pretty good beginner-friendly one. Also, one of the main collectibles in this game is trying to rescue these doggies, which is pretty great. So anyone that's a dog lover would definitely love this game too. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers what I have to say about it. It's a pretty chill Metroidvania game that I personally really liked, though I'm sure some people that are more expert about it probably might not like it as much, but I liked it. Now as for the next game, though there's actually two of them that I actually played back to back, and that happens to be Dino Crisis 1 and 2. So the first game is a game that I really liked years ago, but I never finished it because I remember getting stuck at a part, and back then, I refused to use guides because I felt like they were like cheating and shit, but of course nowadays it's like, dude, like, I don't got all the time in the world anymore, I just want to just play through some of these games. And as for Dino Crisis 2, I actually never played it until this year, so this was actually like a brand new experience for me, and I gotta say, I actually did enjoy both games, but for different reasons. So the first game is your standard horror game, very similar to Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs, and not only do I really like the whole aesthetic of the game where it's dark and gritty and also kind of reminds me of Jurassic Park, but I also really like the main character as well. I actually thought Virginia was a really cool character. And as for Dino Crisis 2, believe it or not, this one is actually more of an action game, where like dinosaurs are always flying at you, and every time you kill them you get money out of it, and you can go around and buy shit for your guns and whatnot. In a strange way, it kind of does feel like a proto-Onimusha 1, which I thought was pretty interesting. Also, Dino Crisis 2 doesn't have nearly as much puzzles like in the first game, although some of the puzzles in Dino Crisis 1 weren't too bad. The only one I really didn't like was the one with like picking up the crane and shit. Because it's kind of interesting, where you got some people that really love the first game, but they don't like 2 or 3. Well, to be fair, not many people like 3 at all. But then you got some people that like 2, but they don't like 1, so I always thought that was interesting, and yet here I am who actually likes both of them. But I will say that as much as I do like 2, I did find that the game was really short. Also, there is not a lot of content after beating the game, like there's no alternate costumes, no other characters. I think you do unlock a mode where you can like run around and kill dinosaurs in an empty arena, and I think you can even use a tank in the arena, which is kind of funny. But outside of that though, yeah, there's not really a lot of like, you know, extra things you can unlock. Where the first game does have a few extra things you can unlock that's pretty interesting. Also, by the way, I actually played the Dreamcast version of Dino Crisis 1, because I've always played it on PS1 back in the day, and playing it on the Dreamcast version, it actually looked really damn good on there. So yeah, it was pretty satisfying to beat these two games after so many years of always like really liking them, but just never like finished the first one and then just never playing 2 at all. And as for the next one, so this happens to be an indie game called Evil Tonight. So this is a survival horror game that's 2D, and it has a top-down perspective. It kind of looks like a Zelda game, but I don't know if I'd fully classify it as a Zelda game, but it definitely does kind of look like one. So this was a game that I bought just because I thought it looked really cool, and when I played it, yeah, I actually did kind of like this game. You just run around the mansion, you find different weapons, and find different key items, and you kill a bunch of cool-looking enemies. You know, the usual survival horror stuff, but I actually did really enjoy this game. But one cool mode that I did really like that this game included is that when you beat the game, you can unlock a mode where you start out with every single weapon in the game, but every time you kill an enemy, it drops ammo. So, in an interesting way, this mode almost kind of feels like a full-on action game, and it's kind of awesome. I wish more survival horror games would have modes like that, so you can just like shoot the shit out of everything after all like the shit you were going through. Now, one thing I will say is that this game on normal mode is pretty tough on normal, so if you are like not the greatest at these games, I would say playing on easy mode is recommended. I mean, hell, even if you are like pretty decent at them, I do think that normal mode is pretty tough on normal. Like, most of the enemies take quite a few hits on normal mode. Like, even the knife like takes like so many hits just to kill an early on bat. It's a bit ridiculous. Unless you're perfectly okay with that kind of challenge, but I'm just letting you all know now that, yeah, normal mode for me I thought was a little bit too tough for a normal mode. It just felt like hard. And another thing I should let you all know too is that this game doesn't have a map, and sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to try to remember like what keys go to like which doors. But other than this, I did find it to be a pretty enjoyable survival horror game in a 2D style with a cool pixel art style. Plus, a lot of the boss battles were pretty intense and very fun challenges to overcome. Alright, and the next one here, and yes, as you can tell, we're in October season, so yeah, Evil Tonight was the first one I beat in October, but as for this one, I actually did it on stream, and it was a game that I played many times on this channel, but I was never great at it, but I finally did it, and that happens to be Splatterhouse on PC Engine. Now, I've talked about this game on my top 30 PC Engine games, so I won't say too much about it here, but, you know, it's a pretty well-known game as it is, and yeah, I still really like this game. I still think it is very, very fun. It's just very, very hard. But damn, was it very satisfying to complete this game after all these years. Hopefully one day I'll finally conquer Hagane: The Final Conflict on Super Nintendo. That's another one that's also been a long time coming for me, but yeah, anyways, Splatterhouse is still a good-ass time, and maybe one day I'll have to play through the remake of it. And as for this next game, this is another game that I actually streamed quite a lot throughout the year, although there was an understandable reason why I did it, and that happens to be God Hand on PS2. So this is a game that I've played many times before, but I never got super far into the game, and of course, this game does start out pretty damn difficult. But it is one of those games that does get better as you play more of the game, because you start to learn more moves of the game, and once you start getting more moves that are more comfortable to your style of play, it does get a lot better, and by the time you do get more moves that are more comfortable, you're gonna get used to the whole weird tank control movement of this game. But one funny thing to look back on though, is that even though Gene has to be played with tank controls, I still found he was a lot more fun to play as than Roberto in Dawn of Dreams. So yeah, this game is just so damn hilarious and so damn fun. But as much fun as it is, it definitely does have some flaws, like for an example, like the tank controls does take a lot of time to get used to. Also the boss, where you have to fight the girl in the circus tent, man, like that boss was like way too hard for a midpoint boss. In fact, I actually find that boss was even harder than the final boss. And also the reason why it took me many streams to beat this game was that, because you're always constantly spamming buttons in this game, it does get very fatiguing to play after a little bit. So it's a game that I would only recommend playing in short bursts rather than long sessions unless you want to develop carpal tunnel. So in a way, this game does kind of remind me of another Capcom game called Piano 3 on the GameCube. That's another game where you're like always spamming the A button and you just can't play it for a long session. But yeah, despite all these things though, like once you get into a groove of this game, it is pretty damn fun and very entertaining throughout. Like this game is very far from boring, and it's definitely the type of game that we just don't see anymore, or if we do see them, they're gonna be some random indie game and not like some AAA game. Like there's no way that Capcom is ever gonna make a game like this anymore. But in a weird way, that's kind of what makes it extra special, and it was a very satisfying game to complete after all this time. And the next one we have is yet another double feature. And just like Dino Crisis, they're also on PS1, and that happens to be Arc the Lad 1 and 2. So the first thing I'm going to get out of the way is that I'm mostly going to be talking about 2, because Arc the Lad 1 is basically a demo. So the first game is really just a prequel where it gives you some background on some characters and the world and all that, which is all well and good, but the second one is where it really fleshes everything out. And let me tell you this is a series that I've always wanted to play for a long ass time. I even still have that big ass collection that Working Design put out. But just like with every game out there, there's just too many video games to the point that sometimes you just lose track of certain series, and then eventually I'll just get around to them. And yes, I finally did. So this is a tactical strategy RPG on a grid base, but unlike most of them though, this one actually does have a lot of exploration where it has going into towns, doing dungeons. So it is pretty similar to games like Shining Force 2. And I actually did enjoy my time with Arc the Lad 2. I actually thought it was a pretty good enjoyable game. For that, it actually had a really good dark story. In fact, the story of this game was a lot more darker than I was expecting. I mean, just to kind of give you an idea, was that the very beginning of 2, it starts out as the main character Elk, where he is a kid, and he witnesses a whole bunch of people in his village dying in front of him. The way it's depicted was pretty dark too, so the fact that that was like the very opening of the game, yeah, that kind of sets the tone. And there's plenty of other dark moments too that are also quite surprising as well, but I'm not going to get into everything here. So yeah, I actually did like the story in this game, and I also did enjoy the characters quite a bit as well. In fact, I actually found that a lot of the characters that were in 1 were also like way better in this game, because I felt like in 1, it kind of starts out as a little bit generic-ish, and then this is the one where it's like, yeah, they're actually finally doing some good shit. And I also really like the world too. It's a very interesting setting where it kind of has both mixture of like medieval meets like futuristic and has some steampunk stuff. It's really cool looking. I definitely like a lot of the architecture, the designs of many of the buildings, and also some of the vehicles and such. And like I said about the whole strategy RPG mixed with exploration with towns and such, I actually have always liked that mixture. And I think they did a really good job here. But I will say that sometimes this game can get a little bit tricky at parts. Like, I wouldn't qualify this as a bullshit hard RPG, but there are definitely some parts that can be a little bit of a struggle. But I also think that the difficulty also really depends on, like, how you manage your party and, trying to get, like, the best equipment and such. Because also the way how they do the equipment in this game is pretty different from most. So all the items have levels to them, and they cap at a certain level. And sometimes when you go to a new area and you buy, like, a new weapon, you realize that, oh shit, this weapon is, like, way weaker than the one I currently have. But yet, it actually, like, will get stronger as you use it more. And sometimes there'll be some weapons that may have weaker stats, but will have some really good status effects. Yeah, the first time I was playing this, it did kind of trip me up a little bit, because I was like, man, like, why are all these weapons so shit? And then I realized, like, oh, because you gotta level them up for a little bit, that's why. So it's mostly recommended to look at the maximum level cap of a weapon more so than the actual stats. And I also really like this game's soundtrack as well. I actually think it had a lot of, like, really cool sounding tracks. In particular, I really like some of the boss music. But as much as I do like this game though, I'm not 100% sure if I would say it's like one of my top favorite like RPGs on the PS1, because as you know, there's a lot of really good ones on there. But I do think this was a very enjoyable one that I'm glad to have played, as it's been a long time coming for me, and I was not disappointed. Well, maybe 1 was a little bit disappointing because of how short it was and how, like, you know, the story kind of started kind of generic, but 2 definitely made up for it. And obviously with knowing that, yeah, I didn't get around to playing 3, because after playing 1 and 2 back to back, I just felt like I really needed a break. So eventually I will go back and play 3, but as for when, yeah, I have no idea. But either way though, I'm glad to have played Arc the Lad 2, and I do personally consider it to be a pretty underrated RPG, as I feel like it doesn't get talked about nearly as much as other RPGs that tend to get talked about a lot on PS1. Alright, now as for the next one, and this is yet another PS1 game, and it is a Japan-only game, but no, I did not review this one, because, you know, I tend to review a lot of those, and that happens to be Gear Fighter Den-O. So this is a 2D beat-em-up that's based after a mecha show. Now, I haven't seen the show yet, although I did recently found out that apparently all the episodes are now translated with English subs, so hey, perfect timing, right? So yeah, it's a 2D beat-em-up where you get to play as a giant mech and you get to beat the shit out of everything. How could you go wrong with that? But one thing that I thought was pretty impressive with the game was that there's quite a bit of different moves that you can do within this game, and they're all pretty fun to pull off. Also, the 2D graphics in this game are pretty nice too. But the one weird thing that this game does have is that for certain boss battles, it will then turn into a 3D fighting game, but yet these 3D fighting game parts still kind of feel like the beat 'em up part, so it does kind of feel a little weird, but it's not bad. If anything, it does kind of remind me of the Sega Genesis game Mazen Saga, which is a game I do really like, but unfortunately the boss battles in that game can be a little bit awkward though, because they're just so very different. But in Gear Fighter Den-O, I do feel like that these 3D parts are a lot better than the ones in Mazen Saga. But other than that one thing though, this honestly is a very enjoyable beat 'em up, so if you do like a bunch of 2D beat 'em ups, I do think this one is at least worth giving a try. Plus it's another game that's good, that's based after an obscure anime, which is always nice and refreshing to find. And next up we got here happens to be Sly Cooper 1 on PS2. So this is an interesting one for me because this is a trilogy of games I never played back when they came out. The very first time I played Sly Cooper, the first one, was on PS3 when they gave the game away for free. And I did play it for a little bit, and I did enjoy it, but I just never finished it and went back to it until now. So because this one is a pretty well-known game, I don't really think I need to go over like everything, as, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. You play as a raccoon who's a thief, and you have your gang of buddies, and you're all just trying to like get back the shit that was stolen from you. But the actual platforming itself is really fun, and I was like having a really good chill time playing this game. And here's the funny thing, even though I've died like a bunch of times in this game, I was never frustrated. Like, I was actually still having a fun time. Like, the game never annoyed me. So that's how you know you have a really good, well-designed game when even when you die a lot and make a lot of screw-ups and shit, you're still having fun. And one random fact I'd like to mention is that the creators of this series are really big fans of the anime series Lupin the Third, and I guess it's not really like too surprising because, you know, you can see a lot of similarities between the two, but it's one of those things I just never really put two and two together, and now it makes so much sense, and it actually kind of makes me appreciate it more. So yeah, this was a really good one that I'm glad to have finally finished it, and I will definitely be playing more of the other games, as I've never played 2 at all, and I did play 3 for like a little tiny bit because it was a game I found at a thrift store, and I also played a little tiny bit of the one on the Vita, so yeah, kinda weird that 2 is the only one I like never touched at all, and the weirdest part is that this actually isn't the only time I've done this with a Sony IP. It's also happened with the Jak series where I played 1 and 3, and also happened with Ratchet & Clank where I played the first one and the third one, which I believe is Up Your Arsenals. Yeah, very strange how that happened, so no, obviously I don't have a vendetta against number 2s, because clearly I was playing a lot of different number 2 games in here. Alright, now moving on to the next one, and we're almost done here. So this next one is actually yet another Crash Bandicoot game, but it's not a traditional one, and that happens to be Crash Nitro Kart. So here's something I have to mention, is that usually I don't really include a lot of racing games or fighting games in these little like end of the year things, because most of them don't have any kind of story mode or campaign to them. It's just like an arcade run sort of thing. And because of that, if I had to include every single one that I ever did like an arcade run for, we'd be here for like fucking ever. Plus there's like so many other ones that I played throughout the years, and if I was trying to like track down every single one, it would just be a pain in the ass, so I'm just like, fuck it. These are the type of games I'm just gonna play when I just don't feel like wanting to do any like completion shit. So that being said, I'm including Crash Nitro Kart because obviously it actually has a story mode in the game, and the story mode was a really good ass fun time. So I'm mostly familiar with the PS1 game, which I've always really loved the hell out of, and when I was playing this game, yeah, it really just felt like an extension to that, which I'm perfectly okay with. So I really like the hub world in this game. I always thought it was really cool looking. I also love a lot of the tracks in this game. Also, the story itself was pretty amusing and funny as well, which I also liked. And by the way, I was actually playing as the Crash team, so the good guy team, and I've heard that the villain team is actually like way funnier, so I'm definitely going to be doing that at some point. And I won't lie, this might actually be one of my other favorite games that I played in 2025. Like, it was really that good. So if you're also like me, who only played the PS1 game and never bothered with any other ones, this one is definitely worth playing, as I do feel like that it's pretty much almost on the same level as the first game. Like, there's a couple things that are better, there's a couple things that are not as good, so it kind of balances out, but either way though, like, they're both fucking great. Alright, now 2 more left, and these last 2 games are pretty weird ones, so let's get right to it. So this next one here is a GameCube game. Yeah, I haven't completed a new GameCube game in a while, and the one that I happened to pick, of all of them, was Summoner 2: Goddess Reborn. So this is a Western action RPG, and as for the reason why I chose to play this game, I don't know, there was something about it that always kind of intrigued me, but before I really start talking about this game, I have to give a little bit of a history lesson with the first game, because the first time I ever played Summoner 1 on PS2, which was a launch game, it was a game I found at a thrift store, and I remember I played it, and I was like, wow, this game is fucking terrible. But you guys gotta remember that when I played that game, it was like years after when it came out, so it's clearly one of those games that just did not age very well. And then I remember I was looking stuff up about that game, and I found out that it had a sequel, and that sequel was also on the GameCube, and I was all like, that is pretty damn weird, but I kinda wanna try it now. And I finally did, and yeah, I can definitely say that, compared to the first game, it's a fucking masterpiece. But as for its own merits, yeah, it was okay. Like, I didn't mind it, I didn't hate it, but it definitely does have some weird flaws in it, though. Like, weirdly enough, this is one of those games that, even though it did have a lot of weird flaws and it was kind of average, I was, like, not bored with it, and I kind of just wanted to see where it went the whole time. And it was definitely one of the more weirder experienced games that I played this year that wasn't a Japan-only game for reviews. So the first weird thing I do want to bring up, although it is kind of cool, is that this game on PS2 and GameCube has some pretty interesting differences, but the one major difference is that the main character, Maya, she has a completely different design on each platform. I'm not sure why that is, but it's pretty weird and cool at the same time. So anyways though, so you play as Maya and you have a group of party members that you can acquire, and of course they all have their very differences, and I can tell you one thing for sure is that this game definitely has some broken shit in there that can definitely make the experience pretty cheese. Because the MP in this game does regenerate over time pretty quickly, and the healing magic does not take up much at all, so yeah, you can pretty much heal infinitely almost. And it is one of those games that you can save literally anywhere you want, which I do really like that, but I am just letting you know that it is one of those games that you can easily save scum in this game without having to use save states. And the game's combat, it's very simplistic, and it does kind of feel a bit janky, but weirdly enough, I was kind of liking it. Like, I don't know, like, it's kind of a weird guilty pleasure for me. Also, I do kind of like the architecture with certain areas of this game. Like, there's some pretty cool looking towns in this game that you do get to go to. Plus, there is a robot girl that joins your party, which is something I was not expecting this game to have. But one flaw that this game does have that I was not a fan of was that there are some parts in this game where you do have to use your main character by yourself, and you have to go through these hallways and kill some monsters that are kind of annoying to fight on your own, but you can't, like, run away from them. Like, you'll try to, like, go through a door and your character will be like, no, I have to kill every single enemy here, and I'm just like, dude, fuck the enemy, just fucking go for it. So unfortunately, there is a couple parts that are kinda like that. Plus, trying to revive people can take a long time too, which is also a little bit tedious, so yeah, this game definitely has a lot of weird shit in it, and I can say for sure that of all the games on this list, this is probably the worst one, but despite me saying it's the worst one, I wasn't hating it, and in fact, I actually thought it was, like, weirdly fun. I don't know, like I said, this is like a weird guilty pleasure for me. Like, I can't say this game is good, and I'm not gonna recommend it to all of you, but there was just something weird about it that I thought was kind of intriguing, so there you go. That's Summoner 2 Goddess Reborn. Hell of a lot better than the first game, so I don't know, maybe that's the part of the reason why I like it, is because it was just so much better than that game. Alright, as for the final game in this video, and also the other weird title, so this is a game that I had a pretty interesting history with a couple years ago. Actually, it was about almost 10 years ago now that I think about it. So, this game happens to be Ephemeral Fantasia on PS2. So one funny thing I have to say right off the bat was that I actually beat this game on Christmas Day. Yeah, out of all the games you can beat on Christmas, this was one that I sure hell wasn't expecting. Now, before we really get into it here, I do want to say that this is a game I actually wanted to review back in the day. I want to say it was like maybe 2015, 2016. But when I tried playing it at the time, I was like, god damn, like, what the hell am I doing in this game? So I tried looking up a guide, and when I was reading up everything, it just seemed way overwhelming, and I was just like, okay, I can't do this shit right now. So I ended up putting it off, and then I just never touched it again, and I was like, man, like, the online reviews were right about this game. It fucking sucks. But the one thing about this game that made me want to try it again was that I did a stream not long ago called the Horrible RPG stream, and this is one of the games I included because, well, like I said, I thought the game was fucking horrible. And then ever since then, I kept thinking about the game, and I was just like, man, you know, it really is a shame that this game is such a pain in the ass to play, because there's actually a lot of things about this game that I really want to like. For some examples being, I really like the art direction and the art style of the game, because the game reminds me a lot of Grandia 2, and as you know, that's like one of my favorite games ever made, so the fact that this game reminds me of it, it's like, man, like, I have to love this shit. And yes, even though the graphics of this game definitely do not look like a PS2 game, I actually do kind of like the aesthetic of this game. It's like a tropical island sort of thing. It kind of reminds me of a Dreamcast game, which, by the way, this game was originally designed for the Dreamcast, but then it got moved up to PS2. Also, another thing that really surprised me about this game, that it was another reason why that I had to love it, was that it has a really good soundtrack, but not only that, but the person that composed this game was the same one that did all those great Yu-Gi-Oh! Soundtracks from back in the day. I'm talking about Forbidden Memories, Duelist of the Roses, like, there's a lot of songs in this game that definitely sound like something right out of Duelist of the Roses, and, well, I love that shit. So yeah, there was a lot of things about this game that I was like, oh, like, I want to love it, but I don't. But then I decided to give it another shot, and I even used a guide the whole time, and by the end of this game, I gotta say, was that I actually started to appreciate this game. But with that said, I still don't really recommend this game unless you're perfectly okay with using a guide the whole time, because man, like, the biggest problem with this game, and the reason why this game got so much bad reviews back then, is the fact that it is so goddamn cryptic. But after getting over the cryptic hump, I gotta say, I actually was somewhat liking it. Like, I would at least say it's an above average game, if that shit was fixed. Because the battle system, while very simple and easy and to the point, I actually thought it was pretty good for the most part. Like, it wasn't like too slow as shit or anything. Like, sure, there are some enemies that do have some attack animations that are a little bit of a drag, but it wasn't too bad. Also, this game has a time management thing, and as you all know, time management with me is a very mixed bag, mostly bad, but you know, there are some games that knew how to do it okay. And when you first play this game, it's gonna be very stressful, but as you get further into it though, it actually does get pretty lenient and more forgiving. But one good thing I can say about the time management of this game is that, unlike Majora's Mask, the one game that this game tends to get compared to a lot, you don't gotta worry about getting a game over by running out of time, because in this game, you have 5 days, and at the end of the 5th day, time actually goes backwards, so you're actually kinda supposed to let the time run out at certain parts of the game, so no, it's not like Majora's Mask where once the time is up, you just get a game over and you fucking die. And the reason why the whole time management thing happens in this game is actually pretty interesting. So, when it comes to the whole story aspect, when you first play it, it just seems like a very average game where, you know, you're a guy who goes to an island, and then of course you meet up with this Sephiroth-looking guy who is totally not evil, and then it turns out there's like a princess that's like having to be forced to marry the Sephiroth-looking guy, and you're just thinking like, okay, yeah, it's like everything I've ever fucking heard before. But once the first week is up and the time goes backwards, then you realize that there's actually a lot more interesting shit going on. So it turns out that when time goes backwards, it's all done because the Sephiroth guy has the power to turn back time by 5 days, and everybody forgets everything about it, but for some strange reason, your guy does remember it. So it's very similar to the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, but as an RPG. So when that happens, now your whole main objective is that you're trying to recruit a bunch of people on the island to try to remember everything, this whole time looping thing, and you gotta get them to believe you and shit. And then once you get all these people, then you have to try to fight back at the Sephiroth looking guy. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea, and there is definitely some other parts later on in the game that do get pretty fascinating, but obviously I'm not gonna give away everything here like I've been saying. And there is a couple characters that I did like in this game too. Now the main character, his default name is Mouse, which is kind of amusing, but he happens to have a guitar that talks and has a personality, and his personality is actually pretty funny and amusing, so in a lot of ways he kind of reminds me a little bit of Gwynwar Weiss from Nier. It makes me wonder if Yoko Taro got the idea of that from this game. And I also like the character Rumi, or what the English localization called her is Rummy, but you know, it's such a crummy name, so yeah, we're calling her Rumi. But yeah, I thought she was a really good, fun character in this game. And there's also a thief character that joins later on too, that I also thought was pretty interesting as well. But unfortunately, there are some characters that don't get a whole lot of screen time. Like, one character that I really liked, but he didn't really do a lot, was the character Bake. And by the way, trying to unlock this character is apparently, like, really hard, and the fact that I managed to do it was, like, kinda satisfying. But yeah, unfortunately, there are some characters that are pretty cool, but they just don't get a lot of screen time. And then there are some that do get a lot of screen time, and I do think are actually quite good. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I'm going to say about this game. I could literally turn this, like, ending part of the video into a whole ass review of Enferal Fantasia, but, you know, I'm not going to do that today. But if there is anything you guys want to know about this game, just feel free to let me know, and, you know, I'll try to clear it up, because I know this is a game that so many people are so fascinated by, right? Yeah, I know, this is a game that, like, almost nobody gives a fuck about. Like, so much so that there's even barely any fan art from this game. And it's kind of a shame, too, because there are some pretty cool character designs in this. There's even a character that looks kind of similar to Diaz from Star Ocean 2. So yeah, this was a game that I hated at first, and now I actually grew to somewhat like it. And it's quite the bizarre game to end the year off with, so yeah, there you go. That will be it for all the games that I finished in 2025. So if there is any game here that you've played before, just feel free to let me know, or if there's any game that you look forward to playing, or even just tell me some of your own games that you've played and beaten in 2025, and, you know, we'll talk about ones that you're hoping to beat in 2026, so that being said, thank you for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.